So everyone, I think it's safe to say that DC has been on quite the ride in the past 10 years, and then some. With that being said, given the renewed effort to start a brand new DC universe, there is a tremendous amount of pressure, and that feels like an understatement saying that, a tremendous amount of pressure for achieving success. And a lot is riding on Superman Legacy, which has to make an all-important impact on the audience in order for the DCU to just have the legs it needs to ignite a successful universe that spans that 8 to 10 year plan. So we had the Snyderverse, which began in 2013, where along the way it kind of got turned into a somewhat different verse of movies, if you will, that attempted to carry on the continuity in various directions, all without Snyder's input, which then led to every DCEU movie after the biggest hit with Aquaman unfortunately struggling to find their footing, with every following entry unable to surpass 400 million at the worldwide box office. And looking back at it now, in retrospect, the most significant update post-Justice League with regards to just universe plans surrounded Black Adam under the banner of Dwayne Johnson's large ambitions.
Things will never be the same.
For Dwayne Johnson, what this would have meant is that it would have built out the DCEU with the JSA, a new Henry Cavill Superman movie that we almost kind of got, and an eventual Superman versus Black Adam showdown, among other things. But as usual with the handling of DC under Warner Brothers, nothing was really ever straightforward. Among Dwayne Johnson's plans, there were in fact other universe-changing plans taking place. So this involved Michael Keaton staying on as Bruce Wayne / Batman in the DCEU, I think also Sasha Calle's Supergirl after the events of the Flash movie, and even a Batgirl movie which was supposed to be one of the first post-Flash projects to release in the new timeline of the DCEU. Now, to emphasize to you guys, I'm very aware that was a very summarized history of the DCEU, which had a variety of issues which halted its potential. But all while these visions for the future DC Universe were colliding with fan interest being all over the place given the years of messy direction, we were about to get yet another vision coming our way, which kind of takes us to present times. So after the Warner Brothers Discovery merger, and this is where things should be getting very familiar to all of you, David Zaslav sought out new leadership at DC to finally get that clear vision, right, about the future of the brand that could utilize their very popular characters with hopes to result in a successful universe that they had been sorely lacking in a decade prior. And so enter James Gunn and Peter Safran and their plans for the new DCU. Now, as we know, after being named co-heads of DC Studios in October, they would get their heads down immediately, mapping out an 8 to 10 year plan for the universe which spanned movies, TV shows, animation, and even video games. And the first part of their plan was announced to us on January 31st in the YouTube video titled Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, where James Gunn revealed less than half of the initial projects for the first chapter. And even though we have the animated project Creature Commandos releasing first, which is technically our first peek at the DCU, and then actually Waller was announced next in the release order, but I wonder if due to the strikes, if that's still being aimed to film and release before that of the third project. But the main reflection and peek into their new DCU really starts with the first movie, Superman Legacy. The vast bulk of impressions for this new universe will be based on how successful this movie is, which is why there's such a huge pressure on James Gunn to get this right in order just for fans to subscribe to the rest of his Chapter 1 plans, which, to be honest, some are finding lackluster in the first place. Now, one thing that I keep seeing from plenty of people, not everyone, but quite a few people, is that the DCU is dead on arrival. And by this, they mean that when Superman Legacy hits movie theaters, next to no one will watch it, and that it will make less money than, let's say, Shazam 2's $133 million global box office run. And thus, the investment from Warner Brothers and Gunn and Safran's plans would completely waver, and if not completely collapse if that happened. Hence, DCU is dead on arrival. The thing is, believe it or not, surprise, surprise, I don't really believe that. Now, like, I want to stress, this isn't me saying that it's guaranteed to be a mind-blowing success, but to pretend to know for a certainty that the DCU is destined to die with its first freaking cinematic entry, for me, that is a big leap. What I do want to say is that I do understand how some fans of DC have come to a place in where they have this outlook, given just how messed around things have been with the brand, which then instills these fans with this outlook on the future with nothing but this really bleak, pessimistic take. But I don't think that projects an assured reality of the future just because people are saying that it's going to fail. But then again, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I'm going to do now is just kind of give my rough expectations as for how I think things could go from where I'm standing. And just why it puts this insane pressure on Superman Legacy, which I know you guys already know, but you know, arguably, the more I think about it, it feels like this unprecedented pressure in where this movie kind of somewhat needs to carry the potential of this re-envisioned franchise for Warner Brothers, where it can either be very successful into the future, or once again, after the past decade, it crumbles beneath their very feet. So first, after Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom, there's a good year and a half cooldown time until Superman Legacy's release in July 2025, with no other cinematic shared universe movies coming out. There is Joker 2, of course, but at this point, the DCEU has been left behind. So when strictly talking about the next cinematic universe movie, the first is indeed Superman Legacy. I do want to say, though, that Creature Commandos will be out by then, but this is a Max series and not a movie. Also, I do think that people won't really be looking to Creature Commandos to display what the first actual look at the new DCU is going to be. Now, sure, we'll get some impressions because this is a canonical story within that of the DCU, but mainly Superman Legacy has that responsibility, or carries that responsibility, to give us that first look and exposition within live action. So I think it's fair to say, given the timeline that we currently have, the DC brand needs some cooldown time to ignite some interest from those who aren't as interested, even when there's an announcement of a new DCU coming their way. And if anything, it probably needed a bit longer than a year and a half for those particular fans. But regardless, that's still at least some gap of time with nothing much in between, leaving fans to imagine what the promise of the new DCU will be like. But the thing is, imagination alone will not suffice. So during this year and a half until Superman Legacy's release, DC Studios can focus on important brand build up, I guess you could say. Not shoving the DCU into people's face or anything, but little tidbits here and there throughout 2024 to get people excited for the potential of the new DCU. After all, and I think this is something everyone needs to remind themselves of, all we've quite literally had so far is the Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters video, a few castings, and social media replies from James Gunn. That's it. That's it. So I do think that some fans are underestimating the effect the ramp up to the DCU's marketing campaign might have in building interest in what this new universe could turn out to be. As the closer to 2025 we get, the more they will really be trying to generate interest for what's to come by only the next summer. Now, of course, you could turn this around on me and say, but Boba, maybe you're overestimating fans and the ability for their excitement to be rekindled for DC. Just look at how The Flash performed, as well as other recent DC movie entries. Well, that's when I would kind of say to that, believe it or not, I don't think comparing recent DC EU entries from that of a mishandled universe that tried to run before it could walk compares to a new DCU is somewhat broaching the apples and oranges argument for me. Just in terms of that DCEU, the latter movies that came out, or while there was some input from Gunn on like an ending scene, it's still not a product made by the people now in charge, like from start to finish. It's not an actual movie. Like, we haven't seen really one product that reflects their new DCU. However, I do have to acknowledge that this will be true to an extent for some people, because no matter what, you're always going to have some corners of the DC fandom that will never give up on trying to restore a prior universe. And this isn't to be said for everyone who wants to restore the prior universe, but there will be some who won't want to accept anything new, no matter what, unless it is that prior universe. Another thing with Gunn's new universe is that even though there were a handful of actors being kept on from their previous roles, the new DCU is still vastly going to be very refreshed and new. While I totally get the desire for a hard reboot, no previous actors whatsoever, there is still going to be a new continuity being applied to Superman, new aesthetics for DC cities like Metropolis and the entire world, a whole new continuity that can be applied to a ton of things, from lanterns in this universe to Batman, and where he's already at with his Bat family around him. So of course, while there's going to be a sizable number of fans who aren't quite on board right now, I do have a belief that they will have some kind of passion, or at least their interest peaked and perhaps even reignited once the DCU has started production and starts showing some things of substance. Not to mention as well, once Superman Legacy starts production in early 2024 and then eventually marketing starts rolling in, I do think this could lead to a future in where, despite the bitter taste in some fans' mouths at the once future vision of Henry Cavill's Man of Steel sequel, which again, a lot of us are pissed off about that, but I would say there's a couple of sides of that fence where we're kind of annoyed about what could have been, but also, okay, I'm looking to see what's coming our way. And then there's some who are just like, nope, whatsoever, no. I think despite that bitter taste, there would perhaps be some genuine excitement garnered for David Corenswet's Superman, where some minds may come on board just that little bit more too when you start, again, seeing things of substance when the marketing starts rolling out. It's just, we've got quite a little bit of a pavement to follow and a road to follow until that starts happening. And I think it's fair to say that some fans need to see something tangible. So maybe a look at David Corenswet shooting Superman Legacy in the suit for the first time, or maybe that first teaser trailer that's like 1 minute and 45 seconds where you get to see the tone, the atmosphere, the vibe, what Corenswet is like as Superman, the vision for this new universe and first movie, before being persuaded to hop on to any kind of form of hype train going into this new universe. Also, I think despite there being some reservation for what this roadmap is currently looking like to some fans, on the bottom line, starting off with their first proper look at the DCU being a Superman movie is a no-brainer move to make. Superman, needless to say, is an incredibly popular character. Everyone from hardcore fans to the general movie-going audience knows who he is. I do think that despite there being a lot of people going with the whole dead on arrival outlook for the DCU, one of the reasons why I don't think that would necessarily be the case is because I do think a lot of that general movie-going audience will be fascinated in just the idea of a new rebooted Superman movie. Now, of course, this does not mean that it's going to make $1 billion in the worldwide box office. But to say a new continuity Superman movie would make around $136 million in the worldwide box office is also just nonsensical. Man of Steel, the first Superman movie since Superman Returns, made $668 million on a $225 million budget. So all while there was some profit there, it clearly wasn't as successful as what Warner Brothers would have hoped for it to be. Now, of course, all while we don't know the budget for Superman Legacy nor the profit, what I'm trying to get to here through saying that is that even if it had a relatively similar comparison for profit to budget as Man of Steel for the first DCU movie, I really don't think they'd pull the plug there like everyone, not everyone, but some people were saying that it would be, like DCU Dead on Arrival. I think what would happen if it performed around that area is that they'd then opt to carry on as planned to the Lanterns, Max show, and then the second movie in the DCU, The Authority, and just try to continue to make movies that DC fans and casual fans alike would genuinely enjoy seeing, and then operate with the mentality and the grind of earning the audience's trust by providing genuinely good films and shows and not running before they can walk. Now, I know some people would be like, Boba, that's being naive. If Superman Legacy doesn't earn X amount of money, they're not going to continue. It's still a business at the end of the day. True. I'm very aware of that, but I just think that some people are putting a very, very, very high bar on Superman Legacy for Warner Brothers Discovery / DC Studios to even continue. I think if it still doesn't make the money that they would ideally like for it to make, that doesn't mean they're going to completely rip the cord there. Now, if we're talking $133 million like Shazam 2, then maybe that's a bit of another conversation. But again, I don't think that will happen. So I do think they are somewhat expecting not necessarily blowback after The Flash and Black Adam and, well, the past whatever amount of DC movies that didn't surpass 400 million at the box office. But believe it or not, I don't think they're expecting $1 billion either. I mean, that would be a great bonus, but they're looking at the long term with regards to this DCU roadmap. And speaking of, I think Warner Brothers Discovery is really invested in the DCU for the long haul. People talk about Warner Brothers Discovery selling off DC in the future if Superman Legacy doesn't earn as much as it maybe should do in the box office or what it could have done. But they've now recently invested in a massive expansion of their studios at Leavesden near London, in where they plan to make it the central production hub for DC Studios projects for years to come, with the addition of 400,000 square feet of production space and 10 new sound stages with even custom improvements with James Gunn and Peter Safran's input in mind. So when they're developing this, if there's something that James Gunn's like, oh yeah, I think this area would be easier for Superman to fly and lanterns to fly, or like we could shoot spaceships here, and they will now do that. Like, this is big expansion plans because there's lots of stock being put into the longevity of a universe that they want to curate over time. But then, on the other hand, clearly to garner interest for the next movie, of which some fans are expressing doubt in with this initial roadmap, saying, why the Authority? Who are the Authority? Will people even go and see that? Well, that's all the more reason as to why Superman Legacy has this pressure and needs to hit with fans, and why the marketing and the trailers for the first entry needs to make fans borderline salivate at how cool this new DCU looks. It needs to scream, like mainly I would say, it needs to scream potential for what's to come. Because if Superman Legacy not only sells tickets to the degree of very popular, or even like, again, somewhere middling like Man of Steel, but just as importantly achieves people walking out of their cinema expressing not only how much they enjoyed the story of the movie, but the exposition of the DCU itself was impressive, and the somewhat rebooted world is something that they're interested in seeing continue, then that would be a major win in of itself. This first movie, and why it has so much pressure and why it needs to land, is because it really needs to tick boxes, and not just like a singular area of, hey, let's make an awesome Superman movie. It's also, again, the gateway into what is to come. And as a result of that, I do think that despite a lot of people not knowing who the Authority is, it's possible that Gunn could pull off another feat in where people felt the same way about the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. People were saying it was going to flop. Who cares about Guardians of the Galaxy? Blah, blah, blah. But then it did very, very well. However, with that argument I see a lot of people make, Guardians of the Galaxy in the MCU had the benefit of releasing around 9 or so movies into an already successful universe, once again introducing the pressure of why the DCU needs to capture a desire for fans to see more, to the point of being willing to buy tickets to movies for characters that they might not know anything about, all stemming from the first movie. And technically, you know, after that, there's Lanterns, so if people enjoy that, they might be like, oh, damn, I'm going to go see the Authority movie next. But yeah, it's still a lot of selling that they need to do. And as we're nearing a year, which is crazy, now I think about it from the top of my head, since we had the announcement of the co-heads of DC Studios, Gunn has been very vocal with his approach and awareness to not repeat the mistakes of what people have come to recognize as superhero fatigue, going into how that isn't necessarily a real thing, and I personally really do believe this as well. But what the misconception is with that saying of superhero fatigue, or what is the authentic and real claim of spectacle movies, including comic book films, is that they have got repetitive. Repetition in today's spectacle movies is what the real killer of enjoyment is here. And what needs to be at the core is the emotion and the characters, which quite often in the pursuit of making let's throw more and more and more money into this latest spectacle movie and we'll get lots of returns, that is where the failure happens. They neglect and overlook a lot of what really connects the audience to the characters. So if you continue to do that in future comic book movies won't necessarily die out. It's the repetition of the same old formula in comic book movies that is causing the idea of dying out. So all while James Gunn is making these points, of which, I personally think makes a whole bunch of sense, these are just words. And all while we need to wait for the execution and the proof of the pudding, as they say, by actually seeing Superman Legacy, he's saying a lot of the right things that need to be addressed if the future of comic book movies are to be successful, especially if you're launching a new 8-10 year plan in 2023. Also, another thing is that they launched DC Studios as its own entity, with James Gunn even saying Warner Brothers wouldn't be giving notes on a DC Studios production. Since we came on board, we are two separate entities within Warner Brothers Discovery. Now, don't get me wrong, Gunn and Safran would still most certainly answer to David Zaslav, but the arrangement here, with DC Studios being a separate entity, should hopefully not lead to the studio meddling of the past, which led to that messy direction for the former DCEU. So for example, if Snyder operated under what DC Studios has a somewhat freedom of, it's not total freedom, but it's certainly a lot more freedom, then maybe we wouldn't have had things go down the exact same way they did back in like the BVS days, for example. So ultimately here, guys, with my just overall ramble of, discussion in this topic, it is a no-brainer to say that the success of Superman Legacy is extremely important for DC's future. As without the fans, of course, without the faith and newly captured interest of a new universe, despite Superman, Batman, and all the characters being very, very, very popular, if you don't entice the audience, then your universe won't run, let alone walk, or even crawl. People just won't buy the movie tickets. Superman Legacy needs to grip people. And I do think that despite what some may say right now, that when marketing truly begins, that will honestly be a huge make or break it factor for the movie. Now, obviously, Boba, that's what marketing is, right? You need to market your movie, get people to want to see it. But it's ever so critical that they nail what the first impression of Superman Legacy's trailer is and how it will leave people feeling. So all while this is very early to say, but given everything I have said, in my opinion here, I do think we will get a few projects into the DCU beyond Superman Legacy, such as To the Lanterns Max show and The Authority, to measure success rather than just saying it will automatically be dead on arrival from its very first entry. But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you agree with what I have to say? Do you disagree? Obviously, my opinion in this video, it is still subject, of course, to moving pieces. There's things that I can't possibly predict. But even when talking about it, I try to take that into account. And I honestly tried, despite my clear optimism for the DCU, to be objective and look at, okay, look, I get that some people have a bit of taste in their mouth. I get that there's this, I get that there's that. But despite that, there could be a path forward in where it's, not dead on arrival. It might not do amazing, but it might not do terribly bad. It could do great, or it could do just kind of average. But no matter what, like with that, I do think they'll still, go through the trenches of trying to forge out this new DC universe. But nevertheless, there is a huge impact that I wanted to talk about today with just that of the first movie and the pressure that also has with Superman Legacy trying to capture the interest of not only hardcore DC fans, casual DC fans, but also the general movie-going audience. So anyway, looking forward to see what you have to say about this subject down in the comments below. If you got to this point in the video as well, like if you're here right now, leave me a like on it. It really does help me out. Consider subscribing for more content like this. But that's everything from me today, guys. Just thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.